It's a brand new day. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Jill, and we are at the Road Report, where each morning we're talking about who we need to be to build the community we want to live in. As the population gets older, the world gets colder, and I believe to really survive, we need to get bolder. And today we're going to keep on with the theme of building with human design in mind as we focus on the topic of food. So we're going to begin with a deep breath, in 4, hold 4, exhale, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, did you get your nice, good, deep breath? Today, we're going to be talking about the idea of food based on human design. And again, humongous topic, and I just want to give you a little bit of food for thought. And I had mentioned in the Q&A in the fabulous attempt at a hangout, maybe that will get better over time, is that one of the things that I've moved towards, what makes the most sense to me, is to look at how ancient people ate before we invented all these pseudo foods, so to speak. And I heard a doctor talk, and I had put some links below. I'll have the link to this podcast below also. And I can't give you the name of the practice, but basically he's spent 40 years researching ancient food techniques, and he's part of the Weston Price Foundation, which I'm a big fan of. Weston Price, who was a dentist that went around to, I think, 14 different indigenous cultures and countries, people in the teens and 20s, the 1920s, before they had Western influence. And what he found was a very high level of health. He measured by any kind of dental carie, any problem with the teeth, and tuberculosis as a sign of immunity. But what was interesting with the teeth, before any type of Western food became part of that culture, maybe one in anywhere 400 to 600 teeth had a problem. First generation, when that kind of food was introduced, the teeth became uneven and misaligned, and it went down to be like 1 in 8 to 1 in 32 problems with the teeth, like cavities, things like that. Something to think about. One place in the South Pacific had never had suicide until they started having teeth problems with flour and sugar being introduced. Those were their first suicides. If you've ever had tooth pain, you can probably understand why. But the basis of it is that there's a dividing between 3 food groups, not protein, fat, and carbohydrate, but animal, seed, plant. And that's the way that the 3 food groups are dissected, which tends to mirror animal as protein and fat, seed as protein and fat, plant as carbohydrate. And it's a different way of looking at it, and I thought it was a really interesting perspective. But he also talks about a California tribe who I guess left really good detailed notes on their food before Western civilization, is they had over 120 different plants that they ate throughout the day or throughout their diet. And he's tried to mimic that, obviously coming back and saying, well, that's impossible. You can't do that much variety in our current lifestyle. But the plants also had a different component to them. They were more bitter, more nutrient dense, and also had different structures to them. So one of the things I'm really coming to understand is how far away from our original design we have evolved to. So I'm just planting this seed as we literally and metaphorically and pun intended plant the seeds of these ideas about how do we design food systems with the human body, the design of the human body in mind. And not comfort, not convenience, but that I believe is really where true health and wealth and energy, vitality comes from, is when we give our body what it needs. And one of the primary things it needs is food and water, and our food and water are a little questionable these days. We're at that point where we need to ask ourselves, how do we move forward? And this is the point where I'm going to introduce another idea, which is big and kind of depressed. It's very depressing. Is there was a moment not too long ago where I sort of had that aha that, I was learning too much about glyphosates and, the poison in our food. And we are all basically poisoned. And there's really not much we can do about it. And there's the grieving process about this is our future. This is what we've allowed to have happen. And then there's the decision about where we want to go forward. And if you're older, which is part of this population, and if things are going to get colder, which is part of this conversation, we're going to really have to change the way we look at how we grow food. And also, as we move into our second half, it gets back to purpose. So we're not going to be able to undo decades and decades of damage within our own bodies, but part of the design of these systems, or thinking about this, is the survival of the species, of humanity, and do we really want to be a part of contributing to shifting the human design back into our humanity? And that's a great big picture thing, but it's something to think about because, I've talked a lot about purpose and meaning, but if we really think about it, there's not much we can do for ourselves, but there's a lot we can do for our future. Not by doing incredibly humongous, massive changes. It's just little steps along the way. And the first step is really rethinking what does the human body need and how far away have we gotten from it, and what kind of systems do we want to design to bring some of that, I like to say the word wild, but some of that natural human design back into our life, and most importantly, back into our food system. So that's just a little bit of something to think about today. It's easy to go plant a tomato and grow it. It's a whole nother idea to think about how we were designed to eat and what our food supply needs to look at. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to all the people who are subscribing. It's exciting to see those numbers go up. And I will look forward to tomorrow where we continue with this theme. We still have to cover shelter and community. So with that, thank you for spending this time with me. And I will say, we'll take one more deep breath for the road as together we rise with the sun in our eyes, love in our heart, feet solid on the ground, walking on survival road, one day at a time. So with that, live free, die wild, my friend, and I'll see you next time.